It was the late spring of May 19th, 1977. Colleen Stan, a bright-eyed and adventurous 20-year-old woman, woke up early that morning in Eugene, Oregon, filled with excitement. She had planned a surprise trip to Northern California to attend her friend's birthday party, something she had been looking forward to for weeks. Like many young people of her time, Colleen had no car and relied on hitchhiking to travel. Hitchhiking was a common and accepted practice in the 1970s, but even then, Colleen was cautious. She prided herself on her instincts and ability to read people. She stood by the highway with her thumb out, carrying only a backpack and her optimism. Over the course of the day, 2 cars pulled over to offer her a ride, but something about the drivers made her uneasy. She declined both offers and waited. Then a blue Dodge Colt pulled up. Inside was a young couple. Cameron Hooker, 23, and his wife Janice, 19, with their infant daughter in the back seat. The sight of the smiling baby immediately reassured her. They didn't look like predators. They looked like a family. "Where are you headed?" Cameron asked warmly. Colleen told them her destination, and they nodded. "We're going that way," Janice added, smiling from the passenger seat. Colleen climbed into the back seat, her instincts quieted by their seemingly wholesome appearance. But what she didn't know was that this couple had been hunting for her. Cameron Hooker was not a kind-hearted family man. He was a sadistic predator who had spent years fantasizing about owning a slave. His wife Janice had reluctantly agreed to allow him to kidnap a woman, as long as he refrained from abusing her and focused his twisted desires on the victim instead. This arrangement was the only thing holding their marriage together. Colleen Stan was about to walk into the darkest chapter of her life. At first, the ride was uneventful. Cameron and Janice made small talk, asking Colleen about her trip and exchanging pleasantries. The baby cooed softly in the back seat, adding to the sense of security. But as the car continued down the road, Colleen began to feel uneasy. The couple wasn't heading toward her destination. They were taking back roads and winding deeper into unfamiliar territory. "Could you let me out here?" Colleen asked, trying to keep her voice calm. Cameron didn't respond. Instead, he drove the car onto a secluded dirt road surrounded by dense forest. The atmosphere shifted. Colleen's heartbeat quickened, adrenaline surging through her body. Before she could act, Cameron stopped the car, turned off the engine, and pulled a knife from under his seat. "Don't scream," he said coldly. His calm demeanor had vanished, replaced by something darker, something predatory. Janice sat silently in the passenger seat, holding the baby and staring straight ahead, as if she had rehearsed this moment. Cameron forced Colleen out of the car and into the trunk, where he placed a handmade wooden head box over her head. The contraption was heavy and claustrophobic, completely blocking out light and muffling sound. Colleen's world plunged into darkness as the car started moving again. She was trapped, helpless, and terrified. The long drive back to the Hookers' home felt endless. Inside the box, Colleen could barely breathe. The air was hot and stale, and every bump in the road jarred her body. She had no idea where she was being taken, or if she would survive. When the car finally stopped, Colleen had no idea how long she'd been inside the box. Her sense of time had dissolved into a blur of fear and disorientation. Cameron opened the trunk and pulled her out, dragging her into the basement of his home in Red Bluff, California. The basement was dark and cold, filled with chains, ropes, and horrifying handmade devices designed for torture. This was Cameron's lair, a place where he could act out his sadistic fantasies. Cameron stripped Colleen of her clothes and hung her by her wrists from the ceiling. She dangled helplessly, her feet barely touching the ground. He whipped her repeatedly, her screams echoing off the concrete walls. The pain was excruciating, but the humiliation was even worse. Janice watched from the corner of the room, holding the baby and saying nothing. To Colleen, it was clear that this wasn't just Cameron's crime. Janice was complicit. Over the next few days, Cameron made it clear that Colleen's life was no longer her own. He forced her into a small wooden box, barely big enough to crawl into, and kept her locked inside for up to 23 hours a day. The box became her world, a hot, airless coffin where she could barely move. She was only let out to eat scraps of food, use a bucket as a toilet, or endure more abuse. Cameron controlled every aspect of her life, breaking her spirit piece by piece. He wasn't just a sadist, he was a master manipulator. To ensure Colleen's obedience, he created an elaborate lie about a powerful organization called the Company. He told her that the Company monitored her every move and that any attempt to escape would result in her family being tortured and murdered. The threat was so convincing that Colleen became paralyzed with fear. He forced her to sign a contract agreeing to become his slave. The contract was a grotesque mockery of legality, but to Colleen it felt binding. Cameron's control over her was absolute, and her complete isolation from the outside world only deepened her sense of helplessness. She began to lose hope, believing that there was no escape from her nightmare. After 4 years of captivity, something unexpected happened. Cameron Hooker made a decision that would shock anyone familiar with his monstrous control over Colleen. He allowed her to visit her family. To an outsider, this might seem like an act of mercy or guilt, but it was anything but. Cameron's decision was calculated, a terrifying display of just how deep his psychological manipulation had become. By this point, Colleen was so brainwashed by the fear of the Company that Cameron was confident she would never expose him, even when face-to-face with her loved ones. Stay tuned for the next part of this story. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss the upcoming chapters. The journey continues, and the truth behind these haunting tales will leave you speechless. Don't go anywhere. There's so much more to uncover.